Time now to join Frank O'Callaghan for the next instalment of the series Dundalk's Radio and Television People. We will hear now the second part of the tribute to the TV and radio industry, recorded in the County Museum Dundalk in September 2025, with contributions from Noel and Aidan McCann and Stephanie Comiskey, Nee McCann, who talk about their father, Jack McCann, who sold television, radios and bicycles in Clonbrassil Street, and their brother John McCann, who set up a radio and television dealership in Stapleton Court. Rory Hall talks about his father Simon's sales and service shop, the Radio Depot, and about Jack McIntaggart, a service technician who worked in the family business. Seamus Fox was instrumental in educating young electronics technicians in the 1960s when he worked at GEC in Dunleer. Frank Byrne and Tom Lamb recall going to his house 2 evenings a week to learn. Seamus' son John and daughter Margaret share memories of their mother and father and the shop Electrotel at the Market Square, which later became a restaurant.
I'm going to move on now, please, to Dundalk's radio and television dealers. So, when I was researching this, I found in the reference library the Tempest Annual in 1965, and it listed all these people here. I'll read them out. Radio and television dealers: Jack McCann, Clonbrassil Street; Benny Maguire, Church Street; Bernie's, Park Street; the Radio Depot, that's Rory Hall in Jocelyn Street; the Record Shop, Park Street; Peter Traynor, Bridge Street; RTV Rentals, Earl Street; Electrotel, Market Square; GEC Showrooms, Clonbrassil Street; Universal Radio and Televisions, Park Street; Cavendish's Furniture in Clonbrassil Street; and Norton Brothers in Coes Road. In addition to that, we also know, and I researched, we had John McCardle's in Park Street, R.Q. O'Neill's in Earl Street, Des Downey in Francis Street, ITV Rentals in Clonbrassil Street, Farney Furnitures in the same address, and a company called W.P. Baldwin's, which we'll come back to. I found them way back in 1937. So I'm going to try and go through each individual one of these here, because there are a lot of family people here tonight. I'm going to start with Jack McCann. And before we talk to the family, just a few pieces of information. This was Jack, and he was what you would call a very, very good cyclist with Cuchulainn Cycling Club. All the photographs here I got from the McCann family. Here's a photograph of Jack McCann's shop down there beside Stewart's. And here at the corner you'll see he was at the Cellar Bar, which I'm sure a few of you spent a nice hour or so in there. I got this from Liam Gaynor. It's a photograph of a Dundalk versus Liverpool programme in 1980. And Jack McCann had a full page ad in there, and he was advertising Lord Mendy television. And McCann's here, you can see all the freebies they were giving you. They were giving you free this, free that, and free the other. So we asked the question, was that a factor? It was part of the guarantee, and it was part of how they did the business. The pilot television, 17 inches, was 10 shillings weekly. 21 inch was 11 shillings and 9pence weekly. Now, this sort of thing here, I have for most of the companies that I'm going to go through in a few minutes. They're not necessarily all on the screens. So if there's anybody here from a different family and they want information like this about the family, just come and ask me and I'll make sure they get it. So I'd like to welcome Noel and Stephanie and Aidan McCann here, who are the children of Jack. And I'd like to start by asking Noel. Noel, we pointed out there, your dad was a very good cyclist with Cuchulainn Cycling Club. And you told me that he spent a lot of time working in a bicycle shop in England. Tell me a little bit about that, please.
Yeah, Dad, he worked in a bakery first. It was Cavendish's. And then he applied for a job there as a baker, but didn't get it. So a wise owl in the factory said he should apply for a job in London. So he applied for Bates in East Ham in London. They specialised in making lightweight racing bikes. So he applied for the job, and he went over there and he got the job. So he stayed there while he was doing the cycling, you know. So
that's where he got all the cycling
That's
things.
where he got his trade. And then he came back in before 1939 because Bates were closing down because World War II was starting. And then he didn't go back. He set up his business in Clonbrassil Street doing bikes, and then he moved on to other things.
And it looks to me as though the old cycling was in the family, because this little photograph here of this young lady is in the audience tonight.
Yes.
Stephanie, do you want to tell me a little bit about it?
Well, it was tricycle racing, and I decided I'd go in for the race, and my other sister went in as well, Evelyn. So I got second place there and got a tennis racket, which I really liked for the prize. Daddy sponsored one of the races and had given a bicycle for the prize, for first prize. So my sister Evelyn, she won the next race. So she won the bicycle. So she got
She was
a
keeping
new
the bicycle
bike
in the
for,
family.
You know, so she wanted to know today why I was in the book of photographs when I only got second. And
Good
she
for
said,
everybody.
why was I not in it when I got first? So
And listen,
that
you
was
see
it.
the crowd that's here.
Oh,
So
yeah,
what was the
crowd.
occasion there, Stephanie?
Yeah, it was racing in the time. That was a crowd of people really joined for that. It was great sport for all that, for all the racing.
So, Aidan, are you with us here tonight, Aidan? Tell me a little bit about your brother, John. He had a similar type of business in Dundalk, didn't he?
He moved in and he was repairing repairing the televisions upstairs. My father was selling the televisions and John would have been repairing them. And it came a stage where the televisions were getting a bit big. He needed more space, and my father needed more space for the bikes because the racing bikes were coming on very well as well. And John opened up his own place in Stapleton Place. So he was selling televisions in Stapleton Place just beside the old Tesco now.
And sticking this is to any of the three of you there. I remember a tremendous athlete or bicycle rider called Shea Elliott. He was one of the great cyclists in Irish bicycle riding. He had an association with your dad, isn't that right?
Shea O'Hanlon, is it?
Shea O'Hanlon.
Shea O'Hanlon,
Yeah,
yeah. Shea O'Hanlon was one of the best cyclists at the time in Ireland, and he was having serious trouble with the wheels on his bicycle, because he could put that much force into a bicycle. He was constantly buckling the wheels. And my father was at a bike. John was big into the cycling as well. And my father was at a cycle race one day, and he came off the bike, Shea came off the bike, and he was cursing the wheels. And my father says, the issue with your wheels are, he says, it's not threaded right. And he looked at him, he says, what are you talking about? He says, I worked in a factory in England. And he says, whoever's making your wheels, I'm making them incorrectly.
And is that how the spokes were organised in the wheel?
Yeah, the spokes on the wheel would be, each spoke the spokes in one direction. As you put the spokes in the other way, you were supposed to go over two of the spokes and on the one. On his, they were over the three, which he says there was there was a lot of give in it. So my father told him, I'll build you a wheel. So he built him a wheel. And he says, you test that out now. He says, and see, can you buckle that? And he tested it out, and he says, he came back to him. And from that day, Shea O'Hanlon always came down to my father. Even when he bought a new bike, he'd come down and ask him, can you either take the wheels off and redo them, or make me two new wheels again? So word got around. There was a lot of cyclists from Dublin all used to come down to get their wheels built.
And he was one of our leading cyclists. But I also led to believe he came down to your dad's funeral.
He did, yeah. Yeah, when my father died, the respect he had for him and for what he had done for him over the years, himself and a few of the other people from the club came down to my father's funeral to show his respects and for what he had done for him when he was cycling.
Well done to the three of you. We'll move on now, please, and we go to a place called Bernie or Bernie Master Vision. Now, I'm not sure about this and couldn't find out much detail. If you remember the book I showed you, it said Bernie's, but I think Bernie Master Visions were at 1 and 2 Park Street. And the only thing I could find here, again, I got this from Liam Gaynor, it was Canis McManus who ran the place at the time. And this advertisement appeared in the book, the football programme in 1981. That's all I can tell you about Canis McManus and Bernie Master Vision. So we'll move on now. And we'll talk for a minute about the radio depot. This is Rory Hall's place. And you'll see here a lovely old photograph, Simon Hall. You'll see a lot of advertisements here. Remember I told you I had these for other companies as well. In November 1959 and 1960, the radio depot. The thing that catches my eye here is the comment about Hall and Mulhern. So Rory Hall, if I could ask you the question, just tell me a little bit about who's Simon Hall and where the association between Hall and Mulhern came about.
Yeah, Simon Hall was my father, who grew up in Jocelyn Street there in number 9. On that building there with rent and buy on it. But his father then built a house at number 10, which is the window there on the right-hand side. After the Civil War, my father, Simon, was unemployed because he was on the wrong side in the Civil War, on the losing side, and he went to America like a great many other people who were involved in the Civil War and the War of Independence. But in America, he met my mother, who was also in New York for the same reason, and they married out there and came back to Ireland on their honeymoon, and intending to go back to America, but when they were here a few weeks, they decided to stay where they were, and her brother and my father then set up what became known as Hall Mulhern's radio shop. At the time, there was no such thing as a television, and radios were fairly new in 1933. That's when they opened, 33. The Mulhern fella then was an electrical engineer, not an electrician, an electrical engineer, and he got a good job at the ESB in Dublin, so he moved to Dublin and left my father on his own. Father continued in the business until he got ill and died in 1961, December 1961. So that's who he was.
Good story. And you mentioned to me too a gentleman by the name of Jack McIntyre. You had a lot of time for Jack, had you?
Yeah, Jack, my father employed Jack in the late 1930s, and he worked with my father until my father died, and then he worked with me until 1982, when he got ill and retired. He was an extremely intelligent man and an excellent technician, and he was a great employee to have, a very loyal employee to my father and myself. That was Jack. He died in 1987.
Thanks very much, Rory. Nice stories. Going to move on now to Peter Traynor on Bridge Street. Now, I don't think Peter... I'm not sure if Peter made it here tonight. So, Peter gave me this photograph here. This was taken in 1953, 1954. And it was, that's his father there, even though you can't see the father. And this is full of radios in the old shop. But then they moved down to this premises here. And this is an iconic photograph. This was in the book, Some Dundalk Days by Victor Whitmarsh. And I know you've all seen this before, but when you see it in a place like this tonight, it's absolutely huge. This is the old Dundalk Gasworks. And you can see here Peter Traynor's shop beside Brennan's, the bakery, and the old pie area, or the old pie sign outside the shop. Now, when I asked Peter a couple of questions, he told me that the company his father started in 1952 or 1953, and that Peter's grandparents, both of them were school teachers out Kilcurry. He had a lovely story to tell me about Bobby Chester, but we'll come back to Bobby later on. But Peter's main claim to fame here was about his mother. Peter reckoned that his mother was the first woman to erect an aerial in Bridge Street, because the guys who were supposed to do it were arguing about going up and down a ladder. So she went up the ladder herself and put the television aerial up. So, well done. I'm going to move on now to a company called Electrotel. And this is the name of Seamus Fox. Now, I decided to pick a person. I could have picked any one of a number of people, like Larry McBride or Mickey Kearns or Tom Lamb or Paddy O'Hagan, and said a few words about them tonight. And the reason I picked this gentleman here is because of what I heard said about him by Tom Lamb and Frank Byrne. So I'm going to ask a couple of questions here now for background. So I'm going to ask Frank Byrne. Tell me a little bit about Seamus, not his technical abilities, the human side, the guy who helped you and others in life and education and things like that.
Seamus Fox, I first got to know Seamus Fox probably in 1963-64. I was working in John McCardle's. I seen his shop up there earlier in Park Street, doing TVs and putting up areas and so forth. And Seamus was running a course at night. He was a production supervisor in GEC at the time, but in his private time, he was doing night classes for 4 or 5 of us. Tom Lamb was one of them. Who else was on that? Pat O'Hagan. Pat O'Hagan. We came 2 nights a week. We made a subscription to him. And I remember Seamus's wife, Mary, used to make tea for us, biscuits. So I think it was 2 hours the course was on. So that was my first introduction to a bit of theory in electronics. And Seamus got to know him over the year that I was doing the course with him. And I was still working away on John McArdle. So he called me aside one night and he said to me, was I interested in maybe working in GEC, that I knew a bit about TV? I said, sure, I would, yeah. So he organised an interview for me and I got into GEC. Then Seamus was my boss in GEC. Very genuine man. He would try to help you out, and especially on theory, if you showed any interest in it and so forth like that. And he was quite a technical man himself. I remember getting a lift home with him one time. He was after getting a new Triumph Herald, I think it was. Triumph Herald car. And he was trying to organise that when he would meet another car, that his headlights would dip. It's a feature of modern cars, of course, at the moment. But I do remember him. We were changing resistors and one thing and another and driving home, seeing with the headlights dip automatically rather than press the little switch on the floor.
Okay.
Yeah, so I had good experience with Seamus Fox. Certainly taught a lot of him.
Excellent. So Tom Lamb, who's sitting beside you there. Tom, you spoke highly about Seamus in a different way. You talked about and I don't know the technology here, but the technical drawings and how a television worked, and you said that fascinated you. And is this the sort of thing you're talking about here? Tell me about that.
Yes. Well, just before I say that, Seamus told me that he was actually trained in the signals section of the Irish Army. That's where he got his experience from. And then he was working in some production, some of the factories in Dublin. And then he came to Dunleer. But what I found fascinating about Seamus, number one, he was a very fair man. If he could do anything for you, he would. But like the most important thing as far as I was concerned, he could get a circuit diagram like that and he could tell you what every single component in that was for. And he could start at the beginning and he could tell you about the aerial end, the first valve there, the frequency change of the next one, the AF, the next one, the second AF, the next one, the detector, the audio.
So he impressed you?
The whole lot.
So he impressed you?
He impressed me that much that to this day I try and read diagrams the way he could read them.
Very good. Listen, these are the reasons why I selected that person. There could have been any number of people, but I'm delighted to welcome John and Margaret here tonight. John and Margaret are two children of Mary and Seamus. And a question here, if it's not too personal and deep for either of you, but I know you were very young when your dad died. One was 11 years old and the other of you were 14. When you heard these comments about your dad from two people you didn't know, how did you feel?
Yeah, so we were young when Dad passed away, myself and my sister, so a lot of our recollections of my dad and certainly his working life are through third parties, so we knew of his qualities through those stories. We knew that he was talented, we knew that he was generous of spirit, we knew that he was well revered. So it was lovely to hear after all these years affirmation of all those memories and Daddy's journey. You're right, Tom, he was in the army, actually in the RAF in the UK, that's where he was. And then he came back with my mum and my eldest sister to Phillips in I think the one Clonskeagh in Dublin. And then I think he got the call then to join GEC in Dunleer, and that's when, as a family, we set up home here, and we haven't moved since. So, yes, it was nice to hear. Nice comments and reminisce on my dad's journey coming to the great town of Dundalk.
Margaret, have you a comment you'd like to make?
Well, I was very young, so I didn't really know Daddy. So it is really nice and quite emotional to hear people who actually knew him and talk about his character in such a nice way, to be honest. We always knew he was respected, but it's great to actually hear coming from real people rather than third hand. So it's quite emotional and it's nice and it's lovely. And our dear mum passed away 2 years ago, and she'll be smiling down to think that we're talking about Daddy and she's also mentioned yet again. So thank you for that.
Will she make us a cup of tea and give us biscuits?
She certainly would on her apple pie.
Just one or two other things. Seamus, as far as I can recall from John, he was born in Carrick-on-Suir. He worked for Phillips, as John said. But what they didn't say was another quality of the man was that in the spare time he actually taught itinerants to read and write, and that's the quality of the person he was. And there's some of the reasons why I selected that person. I could have selected many, but well done to Seamus Fox, and thank you to his family.
Thank you.
And that was part 2 of Dundalk's Radio and Television People, recorded in the AV Theatre, County Museum, Dundalk, with contributions from Noel, Stephanie and Aidan McCann, Rory Hall, Frank Byrne, Tom Lamb, John Fox and Margaret Gamble, Nee Fox. A special word of appreciation to Jim Carley, who controlled the PowerPoint slides, and thanks to Brian Walsh and the staff at the County Museum Dundalk for organising the television exhibition and facilitation of the venue. In part 3 of the presentation, we will hear contributions from John and James McLaughlin, Deirdre and John McArdle, and Brian O'Neill. The series, Dundalk's Radio and Television People, was researched and presented by Frank O'Callaghan and recorded and edited by Alan Byrne.